some considerations on the basis of Heideggerian thinking. Um, so let's try to find the sparkle in the heart of the diamond, or the essence of the concept of onticness, which plays such a large and, for some people, an tiresome role in Heidegger. So, for instance, uh, I remember many years ago communicating with somebody who was a Kierkegaard scholar, and um, is annoyed tossing off of the saying that Heidegger thinks Kierkegaard is ontic, whatever that means. Um, so the ontic means that we base being on physis, what the Greeks called physis. Um, now, so if we were trying to memorize things in a class, it would be different, but it's much more difficult when you're actually trying to gain an avenue of invasion into your own thinking, rather than gain a set of statements that can be deployed in a timely fashion for rhetoric in the public discussion. But let's look at one simple formula, as it were, but on the claim that this is considered in the Western tradition to be something which always arises of its own once we start digging into things and to start doing aletheia. Let's say, and so starting out this, I'll put this I'll put the Heidegger stuff in a playlist by itself, and then keep doing attempts at radical incursions into the basis of Heidegger. And so we might as well give a quick account of aletheia as, but of course that we could go into it. We can't simply be secure with any statement, but we have to look. But let's say the simple statement is we bring something to sight or consideration. So now we're involved in a consideration of the ontic, or of being based on physis. So, or we're trying to undisclose this to ourselves and enter into it. So, Heidegger's claim is the Greeks have based all their concepts on physis, which is one of three regions which appear when one begins to do research. The others, so physis is the outside, where the solar system is, where plants and trees are, where human beings are, where stones are, where the ocean is, and so on. Where, and generally speaking, where you can point to things. And the tradition, it plays a large role to ask this question: what are the things we can genuinely point to, and what are the things that belong to another region, such as discouragement, for instance. So discouragement seems to belong to another region, and so we could call that the ethical region in a way, and has a different, somehow it, even though it involves physis, it also has its own location. And then the third category would be logos, which for complicated reasons they say there's not properly logic in Aristotle, although obviously you can point to the organon and to the analytics and so on. Just for a shorthand, to say, yes, there's analytics and syllogistics in Aristotle, but there's not, properly speaking, a logic, and the simple justification for that is there's no aletheia of logic explicitly in Aristotle. That only comes a little while after Aristotle, when people start saying, oh, here's this subject matter, let's call it logic, and then they start doing it, they start considerations on it explicitly, they cite it explicitly as a region. So these three regions come up, but being, ousia, availability, property, this is something that's assigned chiefly to physis and goes with physis, and that's Heidegger's big criticism of the ontic is guided to that. But then this is not sufficient as the avenue of invasion that gets a real grip on the matter. Then he wants to go to some text in Aristotle and say Aristotle has shown that in his analysis of physis, as shown through his conception of, or his aletheia of kinesis, where he's saying famously that there's the void, of course dealt with considerably by Plato, Socrates. I always say Plato, Socrates on this, following Strauss, who says, but not just Strauss, but and others, who said it's pretty difficult to distinguish Plato from Socrates in quite a few, in most of Plato's work. And I add myself that usually when we want to say something negative, we assign it more to Plato, and positive more to Socrates. But I think that's more to do to the West, to our current situation in the West. I think maybe if you're Russian, you might be more inclined to speak of Plato more positively. It has some cultural basis to it, but I think rhetorically in America, Socrates has a better reputation. He's a martyr, has been lionized by the Jewish culture through Hellenism. Just on an aside, by the way, the notion of Judaism is a Hellenistic notion. It's a Hellenistic notion from the second book, starting in the second book of Maccabees, probably from Alexandria. But that I mentioned that just because this is another example that touches on aletheia as undisclosing, as bringing something into consideration, which you can't do unless you have the ism word there, Judaism. But before that, you would be talking about the Israelites, the Hebrews, the people in Judea, the Abraham, and then some people much later put on the name Yahwehist, but that's not wasn't contemporary to anyone before that time. But this is the kind of thing I'm saying when I'm saying there's no logic in Aristotle, even though that's obviously wrong from another point of view. So through analysis of kinesis, we get a sort of foothold in the subject matter of what does it mean that the Greeks have made being connected to nature, to this void, place, and movement, which is kind of, you could see how Hegel much later is then connected to Aristotle in this kind of thing. And what is it about Husserl, especially in the 6th chapter of the Logical Investigations, which gives Heidegger a stimulus to break from this and then to say we're no longer doing ontic philosophy. And I believe he would say Karl Jaspers is also no longer doing merely ontic philosophy, because Jaspers has this Umbegreifen concept, or this concept of the encompassing of reflecting on the world and the world, or put another way, let's put it more clearly, there's the environment we're walking around in, and then there's somehow that we're set off against it, and then there's the mystical, the thought, which brings us into the mystical for Jaspers, that the two are must be one, or the kind of non-dualist stuff. But Heidegger doesn't subscribe to that, but he has a different way in, but we don't have to show how to get in. But again, this is to thematize that Heidegger claims the ontic conception or aletheia of being, ousia, is linked to physis for the Greeks, but that he has opened up the Seinfrage, which goes away from that.